Hi, and I'm Kendra, and this is Sage. I'm super excited to be with you all today.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, so my name's Kendra. I use she and they pronouns interchangeably, and I am the data and AI product owner at the Trevor Project. I've been here for about a year and 2 months now. And if I had to summarize what that means in a sentence, it means that I'm navigating the many layers of organizational context, the needs of LGBTQ young people, data, and technology to uncover the most impactful problems to solve. Prior to working at the Trevor Project, I was a senior analyst, a business analyst at Agile Thought, where I was working as a consultant to build enterprise desktop, mobile, and system integrations for one of the big four. And then I was inspired to join the Trevor Project because I wanted to build technology for a mission and values-driven organization for social good, even more so for a community that comprises aspects of my own identity.
Rock on. And as you all might know, my name is David. I use they and them pronouns. I'm currently a senior analyst at Brooklyn Data Co., but in a prior life, I worked on the data team at the Trevor Project and was a Venture for America fellow. My reasons for why I loved being a part of Trevor and still love being a part of Trevor now is their mission to create equitable and scalable mental health services for all folks. Although it's LGBTQ focused, I imagine there's a lot of broader implications of setting up that infrastructure and figuring out how you can reach disparate groups of marginalized people with technology, as Kendra mentioned. As Scott mentioned earlier, we have set up a fundraiser. This is just another plug to click that link and match our donations if you can.
So we'll be going through who the Trevor Project is, our mission for those who don't know, or maybe you just need a refresher. David, who was a key contributor of where we're at with data at Trevor now, along with folks at BDC, will take us through a high level of what this journey entailed. And then finally, we'll chat a bit about data fairness through the lens of a case study that's not specific to Trevor, and then one that is, followed by some Q&A. So we are the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ young people. And our mission is to save young lives by ending suicide among LGBTQ young people by providing support through free suicide prevention and crisis intervention programs on platforms where we know that young people are. So we have a 24/7 phone lifeline, chat, and tech. We also run Trevor Space, the world's largest safe space social networking site for LGBTQ young people. And we also operate innovative education, research, and advocacy programs. And we estimate that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ youth between the ages of 13 and 24 in the USA seriously consider suicide each year and could benefit from our services. And in the last year alone, we directly served over 150,000 crisis contacts. So that's across call, phone, chat, and text from LGBTQ people who reached out for support. So we know that our services are needed. And since 2019, we've been working to scale our volunteer training and management program to increase our counselors trained on a yearly basis by 10 times. And by the end of 2023, our continued growth will allow us to serve more than 1.8 million LGBTQ young people. So I know these are mapped out on the slide for you all here, so I won't read these verbatim, but did want to share some other points that aren't illustrated here that just helps illustrate like why we're so passionate about our mission. Almost 3/4 of youth stated that they either would not or were unsure if they would have contacted another service if the Trevor Project didn't exist. And LGBT youth from highly rejecting families are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide than youth from accepting families. So an organization such as Trevor can mean other mental health outcomes for these people. So we want to be there for them. We also want to be sure that we're there for youth in the moment as well as at other points. So I mentioned our 24/7 services on the left-hand side, where we have counselors who are directly engaging with youth who need our support. I mentioned Trevor Space at the top. So for here, I'll add that on the research front, we have regular evaluations and surveys to ensure our services reduce the risk of suicide and help us learn of the mental health issues that are affecting LGBTQ young people. We do advocacy to protect LGBTQ rights. So we work at the local, the state, and the federal level to advocate for legislation that protects the rights of LGBTQ young people, and education to build allies for the LGBTQ community. We educate adults who interact with youth on LGBTQ competent suicide prevention, risk detection, and response. And we continue to do this because of the folks that reach out to us. 90% report that they experience de-escalation from suicidal thoughts from doing so.
It's a great stat. I always love showing folks that Trevor services are 90% effective because one in life is something that guaranteed. So thanks, Kendra, for giving that intro to sort of the mission and the reason of why the Trevor Project exists. I want to talk a little bit about the data evolution journey at Trevor. So just sort of some like high level stats across the industry, the vast majority, so 85% of nonprofits say that technology is key to success of their organizations. Trevor being one of those organizations that really implore the use of technology for good. But less than a quarter actually report having a long-term strategy and vision for how technology should be used in their organization. These stats, in these stats and quotes, you can replace technology with data as well, because the modern data stack is heavily influenced by technology. And Trevor is no exception to this kind of discrepancy where they knew that it was important, but they didn't really have a long-term vision until about maybe a year or two ago, or when Kendra joined and changed the org to create that vision for them. So before the modern data stack was built for Trevor, there's no unified definitions of KPIs across the org. A lot of our work in setting up the data stack was first doing a lot of interviews across the different stakeholders and just understanding what kind of measures of success they were looking for in terms of their departments for the org. There are a lot of manual downloads from Salesforce data. And before Salesforce, there was another platform called iCarol, where folks would just do Excel downloads and then create ad hoc reports. No one was sort of really monitoring these reports, and there wasn't really a centralized way for folks to access the data in a meaningful way. Because of this, there's also no QA checks through the ETL or now ELT process, and there is no automation, which is probably one of the most frustrating parts of it. As you might kind of extrapolate from the Trevor Project's mission, a lot of what they do is to meet youth in crisis. And sometimes we need data to make decisions in the moment, and that can really affect these mental health outcomes in those moments. And so after we built out the data stack at the Trevor Project, we were able to align KPI definitions and document and maintain them through dbt. So that's not just sort of like creating a data dictionary. It was more so understanding the business logic, understanding what stakeholders want to see. And then, as you all might know, being able to code that and build that in dbt, and then creating relevant documents so that we understood what they meant, so that any analyst could go in and understand how the data was working. We also help train folks to use Seisons for cloud data teams, or Seisons for CDT. Trevor, it's important to note, is now migrating over to Looker as they grow and expand. It'll be really important for folks to self-serve and just sort of poke around autonomously through the data themselves. And we've also been able to create an up-to-date and centrally located data and data insights. So they can go to Seisons for cloud data teams to pull that data. And we also have a warehouse set up now for the Trevor Project so that everything flows through one centrally located spot. And then finally, probably most importantly, we've automated a bunch of different QA capabilities, many of them enabled through dbt tests, just to ensure that the data is coming in cleanly. So before we implement the data stack, there were so many different reasons of why the data wasn't matching up. And through using and implementing dbt, we were able to say, no, this is how it should be. And we're going to create a test to check for that automatically, so that stakeholders and also donors who were at the Trevor Project just trying to convince to work with us with the Trevor Project could have full confidence in the kinds of stories that we're crafting with the data. So this is just a high level overview of the data stack, or the data infrastructure at the Trevor Project, made by Scott. So on the left side is sort of all of the different kinds of tools that Trevor uses. You might see some of them as being familiar: Salesforce, Amplitude, Litmus if you've used training platforms to train large scale folks. And that all gets piped into Google BigQuery, which is their warehousing service, and dbt sort of sits on top of that as the transformation layer. And then that ultimately gets bifurcated down two paths. One is through the BI tool, which is now Looker, and that enables folks to self-serve and build reports that are important for them, so that they can answer questions like, what was the wait time among these different demographics, right? Which might be an important question for someone on their ops team to figure out. And then the other route is this Google AI and ML project, and Kendra will talk a little bit more about that project. But essentially, Trevor Project secured a partnership with Google to build some really interesting AI and machine learning capabilities for the Trevor Project that allows them to better prioritize their queue for folks who chat in, so that they can work with the highest risk folks first, and ensure that the folks that are at the highest need are met, have a reduced wait time. That's an oversimplification. I'm sure Kendra will be able to talk much more eloquently about that process, but want to kick it back to her to talk about data fairness at the Trevor Project.
Yep. So before we get into this, just wanted to state that I don't think fairness and like model discrimination is an issue that's exclusive to data or machine learning or AI applications. It happens with or without technology because we as humans exist. But of course, as we use it, we can see its consequences amplified. So just wanted to say that. One case study that we came across is one where, and this is like not Trevor specific, is where an algorithm was created to determine which patients need additional attention. Sounds like a great use case, right? However, it was found to have racial bias as a result of what I think are multiple factors. So one, there were some imbalanced classes. So the study that informed this looked at more than 6,000, I think, self-identified Black people and nearly 44,000 self-identified white people. And when you think about that, one might draw the conclusion that, Black people receive medical care less often than white peers. And it just kind of makes me like think, is this true? Is it not? And potentially why? You can go to the next slide. And then this model was not analyzed through the lens of race as a variable. And as a result, Black people were not slotted to receive the additional care, the care that they actually need, because their needs were under indexed, despite the fact that they reported having more chronic health conditions than white peers. If we were to take a look at the output of this model and not question it, I think it would be very dangerous and lead to a lot of assumptions. So for example, it could lead the model to believe that Black patients do not spend as much on their healthcare and therefore they must be healthier. But what this doesn't factor is that we know the healthcare system, like many others, disproportionately mistreat Black people and other people of color. There are also higher barriers to receiving care and distrust as a result of being mismanaged and mistreated. So I think the TLDR here is that we need to be aware of where our data comes from, what assumptions and dependencies and biases come with it, and how we use that to train any type of technology. Especially ones that impact the quality of life, which basically feels like it's everything nowadays. Next slide to talk about some Trevor specific stuff. So prior to using artificial intelligence or AI to prioritize incoming chats in our queues, we had a rules-based engine that performed this task. And last year we went live with our AI-powered queue bifurcation system. Our goal for this system is to prioritize youth across our digital channels, so chat and text, so that youth at the highest risk of suicide are connected to a counselor with decreased wait times, regardless of the digital channel they're using to contact us. And by incorporating natural language processing into our existing digital services, we've been able to develop an AI-powered suicide risk assessment that looks at how people respond to what's going on. So it's that like open text field right there on the right-hand side. And the additional questions on this screen to capture, on the screen capture, to automatically assign the young person to the appropriate queue, either like their standard or the priority. So the high level flow is that a chat comes in, we do an ML powered content analysis, and then the high risk are moved to the front of the queue, and then they're connected with the counselor. And how it's helped us is that 100% of our digital cases are now automatically triaged through this NLP process. We also have improved prioritization. So through asking automated pre-conversation questions, it allows us to prioritize digital crisis counseling conversations with significantly more accuracy and help high and imminent risk contexts get connected with our life-saving counselors as quickly as possible. And this model was also shown to have less bias than our baseline model, which gets me into the next slide. So advocating for and implementing the ethical use of AI is a fundamental priority for our team, and an enormous one at that. We have been enabled to assess our model through a fairness lens by the demographic information we received through our chat platform, which is the form that's displayed here. And you can click I did some little animations to be cute. And we lean into this to examine locations that may contain bias to ensure that the models we build are alleviated of discrimination. And with products facing LGBTQ youth, we can be fairly confident that the people using these products face biases in their everyday lives, which are only compounded by factors such as their ethnicity, their gender expression, their sexuality, their race, and so on. Did you want to say anything here, David, or?
Yeah. I just wanted to call out how we've used DBT to sort of organize this information. So as you might see, it's a bunch of multi-select options for folks that they can select their gender identities. And as all of y'all can imagine, that might be sort of a mess on the back end. Without DBT, there was really no way for folks to sort of cleanly do this unless they exported it out, did it in R or SPSS, which is what our research team did to sort of get a base level understanding of the different demographics of the youth that were coming in. But with DBT, we could create simple ones such as, all right, people of color are all of these logic definitions, and then just create that coding sort of through DBT such that they didn't have to do all this extra external manipulation. So yeah, just another way that we've used DBT at Trevor.
So our approach to fairness, which does evolve as we learn more as individuals and as an organization, entails ensuring the privacy of our youth data, working across teams such as product, tech, data, crisis services, research, strategy, and innovation to review our model performance to determine what, if any, changes need to occur. We explore and assess fairness metrics along ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and intersectionality lines in order to make sure that our model is alleviated of discrimination. And I kind of mentioned this at the top of what I just said, but just want to put out there that this is not a static approach by any means. I think that would be doing the community we serve a disservice and ourselves. So totally open to continuing to grow and change this approach as we learn more about the people that we're serving and just kind of what's happening in the industry at large. Oh, and real quick, before we do that, on my team, we are actually hiring for another machine learning engineer. So I want to put that plug there in case you or anyone you know is interested, as well as a data analyst.
Rock on. Thanks, Kendra. Let's move on to the Q&A if folks have any questions.
I have a question while we wait for some more questions to roll in. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really interesting. My question is kind of what's next on the horizon for your AI project? It seems like you've done a lot of really interesting things with it. I'm just curious to see what's coming next.
Yeah. So are you talking about in terms of like that specific ones or like the one that I just mentioned around bifurcation or like things in the future that don't necessarily have to do with bifurcation?
I think things in the future, but if you're very interested in bifurcation, we could talk about that too.
Yeah, sure. So probably more details TBD as we get closer to our certain milestones, but I can say at a high level, we're working to develop training tools that can support training our high quality counselors and support they go through about 40 hours of kind of some self-paced training. So looking for ways that we can introduce some AI to help them practice those skills. And then in the future as well, also looking at how we can support moderation activity on Trevor Space.
Very cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like some people are typing, so we're gonna have some more questions. Oh, well, another one from Jan. Can you talk a little bit more about how your DBT and machine learning work together?
That's a great question. And Kendra, let me know if it's evolved since we've worked on it together. But a lot of the things that we didn't cover in the talk. So there's a lot of different information that we collect that's not just demographic, right? Once we talk with a youth, they get assessed if they're high or imminent risk, or if they're not suicidal, low or medium risk. And so a lot of the machine learning was sort of figuring out, like there's a training data set where we see they've already been assessed at these kinds of risks. And we kind of see if they were fed into this model, if they would have matched up to the high and imminent risk that the NLP would have modeled them at. So a lot of that back-end cleaning of matching up those conversations to those risk levels, as well as the associated demographic data and other data such as wait time and all these other different service level metrics that we care about, were used in conjunction to develop the NLP model to make sure that what we were seeing in the model made sense with the raw data. I don't know if that answered that question.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
No, I've got one kind of while other folks are typing. The kind of nonprofit world is definitely a different kind of setting than kind of a for-profit entity. Kendra, David, can you talk a little bit about like what it's like developing a kind of a project like your kind of machine learning project and the DBT data stack in a nonprofit context instead of a corporate context, and if there were differences or not?
So I would say when it comes to like working with this data stack in particular, that working at Trevor is like my first exposure to it. So maybe I'll kind of like zoom out a little bit and say that when it comes to like any technology that we want to use or how we want to implement it, the one thing that I've noticed that is different, because this is my first time working for a nonprofit, is that there is never a question in anyone's mind like why we're there or what we're doing or who we're doing it for. And I think that since we are so just like organized and inspired by that mission, all of the decisions that we make are rooted in our mission to end LGBTQ suicide, as opposed to like what I've experienced working in like for-profit companies where it's generally just like, how much money can we make the board or the CEOs? And so I think that's probably one of the most like influential pieces and one of the reasons why I enjoy what I do so much now.
Yeah, just to sort of plus one onto that, I think now having come to work at BDC and having a wide variety of clients, the problems at most orgs are usually the same. And so nonprofit or not, the same data issues that come up for the Trevor Project have come up across a variety of different industries and clients.
We have another question from Wyatt, who says, another great presentation. So great. In your experience, how has the data team at Trevor trained the like non-data folks to effectively use Looker and BI tools? Any specific practices that worked well?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in on this, Kendra.
I was going to say that I think since the size sense implementation was before my time, perhaps you can share, and then maybe I can kind of give some insight into like what we're thinking like with Looker.
Yeah, definitely. It's a super great question. And I think oftentimes, or at least when we were working to democratize data at the Trevor Project, we're kind of trying to think, should we start from the bottom up? Should we go from the top down? Ultimately, we decided to go from the top down. So working with the execs of each team and making sure that they understood why it was important that we were building these things out and how to navigate it so that they could sort of disperse it on their teams of how to use the data. It definitely, I think the approach is something that is bespoke to every individual organization, but we really just try to find the key stakeholders that use data frequently and sort of limit to that sort of early adopter set and work with them first and just hopefully have them help disseminate the information. I know while we were working together with the Trevor Project, we hosted some office hours so that folks could just join in and jump on to ask their data questions as needed. But yeah, it's definitely a good question and an interesting problem to tackle.
Yeah, I don't think I would have changed anything there.